First Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, be not red right now. Well, Mr. Speaker, it is time for us right now to all do the right thing for everyday, hardworking Albertans, many of whom are lucky enough to have those mortgage-paying jobs we all seem to talk about in this House. Mr. Speaker, we heard from the member from Calgary-Fish that he hadn't yet heard from any of his constituents on this issue, and that it needed more study to avoid unintended consequences. But today, this law has specific intended consequences, namely the potential, each and every day, of legal seizure of your constituents' land or a portion thereof without compensation. I asked that member, do you truly think we need to send this back to the ALRI after years of expert and legislative recommendations, including unanimous recommendation from a committee chaired by one of your honourable members on which you personally sit? A committee which said, and I quote, "The law of adverse possession is archaic," and then unanimously recommended that the government introduce legislation abolishing the common law doctrine of adverse possession. Do you want to vote against that, members? Do you want to vote to send it somewhere where it doesn't need to be sent and not get it done today? When will this government do so after having similar recommendations in their hands since the spring of 2016? Now is the time, Mr. Speaker. The member for Edmonton-McClung waxed prophetically about indefeasibility, yet the very application of adverse possession in fact makes a mockery of that concept. Property rights and government-administered title registration indeed, noting that on the Service Alberta's own website it clearly states that the government guarantees the accuracy of the title. So why would members opposite not respect their own government's guarantee to Albertans? Is your word and your guarantee of such little consequence? Now is the time, Mr. Speaker, to live up to that guarantee. The now Minister of Transportation has said in previous debate in this House, and I quote, "I find it ironic in a way that it's a new Democrat opposition that is standing up and has stood up from the beginning for the rights of property owners in this province." Mr. Speaker, voting down this bill will be a clear sign to Albertans that the members opposite do not, in fact, stand up for the property rights of all Albertans, irrespective of their political affiliation. We have a duty to Albertans, Mr. Speaker. Shameful, empty rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. So let's put this quite simply. I have a classic example. This is not a partisan issue. I have a constituent who you met in this House, was a guest in this House just last week, who lost a portion of his land. A classic and recent example of bad law in action in my own constituency in the recent case of Moore versus McIndoe. A suburban lot, a misplaced fence, 11+ years of dutifully paying taxes. Then out of the blue, a legal claim of adverse possession, resulting in loss of close to 1,000 square feet of his lot, tens of thousands of dollars in lost value on land that may still hold a mortgage, Mr. Speaker. Tens of thousands spent to fight it on principle, and land seized legally because of this bad law by a possessing neighbour. Mr. Speaker, possession is 10/10 of the law in this province right now, and its squatters' rights rule the day after 10 years and a day, Mr. Speaker. Adverse possession is a time bomb of legal seizure of land for all Albertans. This is a quote from Mr. McIndoe. My resident, my constituent, who motivated me to bring this private members. This is not a partisan issue, Mr. Speaker. This is for everyone in this House, and he brought that forward to me, and that is his quote. This is a time bomb for every Albertan who has lived in their house 10 years plus a day and may have a fence in the wrong location. Property rights and justice indeed, Mr. Speaker. Let this be a reminder that your constituent might be the next to be surprised by such a punitive, unfair legal seizure of their land. If you want that to be a possibility, vote yes to this amendment, and you will be doing a disservice to your constituents. If you believe in doing the right nonpartisan constituent focusing protecting the legal, registered, government-guaranteed property rights of all Albertans, vote no for this amendment and abolish adverse possession now, here, today. Prove that you truly stand up for what is right and the expectations of property rights and ownership protection shared by virtually every Albertan against this outdated, archaic law. Mr. Speaker, let's live up to our responsibility to Albertans, accept overwhelming expert and legislative opinion, and get this done once and for all for hard-working Albertans. And let's not make this, my private member's bill, solely motivated by one of my constituents, Mr. Jim McIndoe, who has given his personal phone number to several members on the opposite side to share his story with him, and nobody has taken him up on that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the same Albertans that this government purports to be making life better for and who have worked hard and struggled so that they personally and their families may have a humble place that they believe they rightly own to call home, let's make sure that that home remains theirs and is not seized through this bill, through through the misapplication of a bad law, Mr. Speaker. So vote no to this reasoned amendment and vote yes to Bill 204. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.